I look okay here on the screen,
Yep, we're
or do
live.
I need to be
No, you're
okay?
good.
Oh, we're live.
We're dead. I hit the
Okay,
button.
great.
Hey, mom.
You hit the button. Okay, here we are.
Sorry, I should have counted down.
No, no, that's okay. That this is called life. Never mind
Yes,
live, right?
yes, exactly. So hi, neurofeedback
Hi.
moms. Hi, Dr. Brown. I am Miriam
Hi.
Bellamy. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the mom who started this group. I've been in practice for almost 25 years. I discovered neurofeedback about 6 years ago for myself and my family. It was so transformative. I started Whole Family Neurofeedback and I started this group. And so, one of the benefits of being a neurofeedback mom is that you get access, direct access to some of the world's leading experts on lots of topics like parenting, child development, and that kind of thing, and neurofeedback. And today we have one of the world's leading experts on neurofeedback, Dr. Val Brown. He is the co-founder of Zengar Institute, along with his wife, Dr. Sue Brown. For many years, he was featured as a keynote speaker nationally and internationally at conferences in the fields of neurofeedback and child psychology. He developed and published the five-phase model of neurofeedback, which was the first and still the only approach to clinical neurofeedback that integrated multiple protocols into a single comprehensive approach. With his background in mathematics, physics, computer programming, and research, he was able to co-develop again with his wife, Dr. Sue Brown, the period three approach, which has ultimately developed into nonlinear or what's known as neuroptimal neurofeedback. We talk a lot about that in the group. So a lot of you I know have heard about that. So welcome, Dr. Brown, Val. Appreciate you being here again with us.
Thank you. I definitely enjoy these kinds of talks, especially when we get to go sort of back and forth the way that you and I have, because
Yeah.
it just makes it more accessible,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and that's really important to me.
And that's part of my job is translating the really complex things you'll say so that
Yeah.
moms
Right,
can
right,
understand, how do we help our kids?
right.
So as we go, please feel free to put your little likes or post comments down below. I'll be able to monitor those, and as those come in, I know we have several neuroptimal folks who are watching this evening, so hopefully they'll pop in some questions as well.
Mhm.
So we wanted to talk about this article that came out. I've got it printed here in November 2022's issue of Science. It's called The Emergent Properties of the Connected Brain. And it's really calling into question this idea that, vision is located here or hearing is here. And it's this idea that the brain function is localized. And so I want you to
Right.
comment first. So brain function isn't localized, right? It's about this interconnectivity. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So can you talk more about that? Go ahead.
Yes, it's not an either or question.
Mm,
It's because, yeah, there are different regions, if you will, to the brain, but just because there are these differentiable regions doesn't mean that they do anything on their own. So you say something like, well, vision is here, or hearing is there, or, that's not entirely true. It's all interconnected, and it makes much more sense to think overall of how the brain functions in terms of Luria's typology of processes, which was three levels of process. The primary process are the absolute dedicated locations. And those are fairly well hidden inside so that they're kind of the most protected, if you will. They're also the oldest. A pretty good example of that is smell. So, smell is bilaterally directly connected so that it motorically as well. So that as soon as you smell something awful that is potentially noxious or toxic, you move back from it. That's a lived response that's just part of the operating system, and
mm,
it's at a very primitive level, which makes sense. You wouldn't want to have a biological organism that would be predisposed to approach things that are potentially toxic. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very little of the brain is organized that way. Very, very little.
Oh, interesting.
Even things that we think of as, the speech center or the speech is a very complex process that involves not just receptive, but also expressive and imaginative
Mm.
probabilities or functions or, aspects. And without all of those things, human speech devolves into just sounds. So to try to say, well, speech is here. No, that's not true. And there are a lot of ways you can see that. One is if that location gets damaged, to a large degree, other regions will take over.
Mm-hmm.
They'll keep that process alive.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really make sense to say, well, it's localized. No, it's how it's organized. Primary process is the smallest of the processes, if you
Mm-hmm.
will.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most localized. It's the most it's if it gets damaged, you may completely lose that ability if it gets
Okay.
damaged badly enough, possibly. Secondary process is sort of what integrates or organizes primary process among many other things. That's not all it does. So it's not just a hierarchy, but it's increasing levels of integration and interactivity. So perception is much more secondary and even tertiary than primary. So when we perceive visually, we're not only perceiving, we're remembering and we're imagining all at the same time. We
Mm-hmm.
can't
Mm-hmm.
separate those out, really. Now, yes, you can constrain the person, you can constrain the visual apparatus, you can do a variety of things to try to isolate down to component skills or processes, but you got to do a lot to make that happen.
What do you mean?
So
What do you mean constrain the individual? What are you talking about?
well, this whole left brain, right brain thing is just off. It's just wrong. And it comes from a misreading of Gazzaniga's studies done in the 60s. He had a cohort of patients who had intractable seizures, something like an average of 7 a day, and they had tried everything and nothing worked. So
Mm-hmm.
the thought was what was happening was too much, quote, crosstalk. The brain is organized so that above a structure known as the corpus callosum, it then is separable into different physical regions and actually into four quadrants. But the primary distinction tends to be left right. That's the sort of the first, most fundamental one.
Mm-hmm.
So the thought was, well, let's sever the corpus callosum, which is that last layer that interconnects, was the thinking. And maybe that will diminish the amount of the seizing activity
Mm-hmm.
because seizing activity emerges in the context of cross connect difficulties of various kinds. They didn't have a sophisticated imaging back then, so they couldn't really tell how that
Okay.
all proliferated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that worked. That did work. It
Mm-hmm.
did decrease the number of seizures that they were experiencing. But it had an interesting side effect, which was you could localize the left half of each of the visual regions of processing. So each of the eyes, their left focus, if you will, focus that way and split that off from the right side focus. And if you did that by putting somebody in a chair and you had their head held in place and they had a special set of, goggles kind of things
Mm-hmm.
on, or like what you see at the optometrist in order to make this happen, um, depending which you showed first, either to the left or to the right visual field, if you put up an ambiguous um, perceptual stimulus like the word yellow written in green letters,
Mm-hmm.
depending which visual field saw it first, the person would say, "Oh, that's yellow,"
Mm-hmm.
or they'd say, "Oh, that's
That's
green."
green. Okay.
right? So everybody went, "Oh my God, look at that! One side's language and one side is, and just, and men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and all, and there's the intuitive side, and there's the no, no, because from my perspective, the most important part of that experiment was what happened after.
Mm,
So you show somebody to their visual field that processes language, so they're reading,
mhm,
and they say, "Oh, that's yellow," and then they get puzzled and they go, "No, wait a minute, no, that's green,"
mhm.
because it integrates the right half,
Yeah.
even though there's no visual access for the right half.
Aha.
And so then it goes, "Oh, it's the word yellow written in green."
So that speaks to this organization that we're talking about, that is
Exactly.
what determines the functionality of the brain and
That's
of the person.
exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
And of the person. That's
Okay.
exactly right. So I'm always intrigued when these kind of studies come out. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, now we know it's all interconnection. No, we knew that a long time ago, or at
Yeah.
least a bunch of us did,
Yeah.
But now there's a new discovery. Pretty
Yeah.
soon it'll be, hey, gravity works.
Yeah.
There'll be this new discovery.
Right.
You know,
But the
uh,
importance of an article like this is that it begins to get to the broader community.
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, as I believe it was Ernst Mach observed once, he said
Mm.
science progresses by a burial each time. Burial
Wow.
at a time is what progresses it,
Okay.
And unfortunately, I think that's largely true.
Okay.
It's overstated because the internet's really helped a lot in that regard.
Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
Because, now this article
Hmm.
has, easily been dispersed all over the planet
Hmm.
to those who are interested in it, including here we are,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we're looking at it. And it's not the same as back in the day, 100 years ago, whatever, when it was all in-person conferences and what you printed in a book, which hopefully people read, and then they went to the next conference, and then you could
Hmm.
discuss it, and you could, now it's like, oh, look at that, look at what they're doing, holy
Right.
cow, let me do it. Oh yeah, if I do this, wow, I see the same thing,
Yeah.
you know. So that's exactly right. It's helping to loosen that stranglehold
Okay.
of this old paradigm that
Yeah.
no, 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 this is where that function is, so we got to train that part, or whatever,
Hmm.
in order to get the function. You never learned that way when you were growing up. You
Hmm.
didn't learn to
Mm.
speak language just through that speech center. You didn't learn to walk and navigate in the world
Hmm.
by just the motor. And it's all integrative stuff.
Hmm.
Nobody teaches you when you're young, when you're a child, and you learn because you have the capability.
Hmm.
Nobody teaches you to walk.
Mm. Hmm.
They help you, they
Mm.
support you while you explore the limits.
Hmm.
That's the difference. And that's a fundamental core of what it is to be a human being. It's a fundamental core of what it is to be an incarnate mammal or being on this planet. It's this self-learning, self-organizing, self-reorganizing, growing capability.
Hmm. Where the whole, again, is greater than the sum of the parts. So I want you to talk
Correct.
about the tertiary level brain function that you're sort of leading to.
Sure.
But I also sort of
Hmm.
want to put a little plug in for people. My next question for Val is gonna be around this idea of what the heck does this have to do with turbulence, which is a concept, that we deal with
Right.
in nonlinear neurofeedback.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Well,
So
I've been known to cause turbulence. It's true.
yes, you
Uh,
have.
uh, tertiary process is an example of tertiary process is something more akin to what we think of as memory. So it's
Hmm.
integrating secondary process kinds of functions or events. So if you see someone who is starting to have early onset, so it's early in the phase of a dementia kind of process, um, they will start to lose the ability to do many steps in a sequence.
Okay.
So you'll say, okay, go to the kitchen, open the cupboard there, and pull out that box of cornflakes and tell me, how full is it? Because I'm going to the grocery store. Well, they'll get to the kitchen, they'll open the door, the, the pantry door, they'll think, oh, was it the cornflakes? Because that step has now become fuzzy.
Okay.
A lot of us have gotten to that age where we go into the room and it's like, why did I come in here? That's an example of it. That's an
Okay.
example. Tertiary process, three-step directions, for instance, is a good example of that.
Okay.
And
I could see that
that's where
really
things like,
being a big deal when it comes to like a marriage, which I've worked with most of, right? Emotional
yes, yeah,
process, right?
exactly.
Wait, I'm
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah.
listen. Oh.
I'm supposed to listen. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for warning me. Yeah. Yeah. And and this is, it's we forget the value of the very little connection things that we do. I as you probably know because you've known me for a while and known of me for a while. Um, there are a couple things that kind of bug me and or are topics that are associated with me and so I'm just going to throw this one out here because it's kind of relevant, but it's probably for a whole other time. Okay.
Okay, okay.
I know the concept of attachment is a big thing now, and about having secure attachment and et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
I really dislike the use of that word
me too.
because attachment has a 2,500-year use history in the Buddhist community.
Mm,
It's not about attaching; it's
right.
about connecting.
That's right. A friend of mine, Hal Runkle, who's an author, and I've had him in the group
Oh
before. He says
yes,
the opposite of attachment is connection, and it's just such a
yes,
simple way to say this profound thing. Yes, we're obsessed with attachment, but man, it's leading us in the wrong
yeah.
direction. Yes, go ahead.
And the connection, the point of bringing up connection is it's all the little things that connect you.
Mm, hmm.
It's,
Mm,
you know, you know how they like their coffee,
mm,
or that they prefer tea,
hmm.
or they have a certain mug that they really like with their tea.
Hmm.
And so you put the tea in the mug and you take it to them
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you know. Yeah, being asked and bringing it is great, and going, oh, it's 4 o'clock, I should do tea. That's great too. But it's kind of like, oh, would you like some tea right now?
Mm.
I'm just
I'm
wondering,
not
it
sure
might
I
be
understand.
nice.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's those little things, and that's why
Yeah.
I'm bringing that up.
Okay.
The difference between the little things that are connecting and that really uh, firmly concretize that relationship
Hmm.
with others, especially our significant others. Um, it's very easy to forget those in pursuit of,
Okay.
oh, that's right, I'm supposed to go to the store and I'm supposed to get these 5 things, and then I'm supposed to come home, and then I have to make dinner, and I have to,
Hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, how did you forget to bring you know, how did you forget to bring the cream home? Well,
Hmm.
I should have put it in the list.
That sounds like
That's
ADHD actually to me. You go,
well, there you go.
you go get
But
groceries and
it's
you leave them at the store. I don't know.
yeah, you leave at the store. And then you go back and you forget why you went back. Yeah, so you buy them all
Now that's
again.
dementia
Right.
right there.
Yeah, that's dementia. That's right. Anyway,
Yeah.
so,
So this
so
tertiary
that's
level is
tertiary
another
process
level of being able to organize so that you
and
can function.
integrate.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
and it's things like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go to, you know, uh, to my child's school and talk to the teacher. That's
Hmm.
right.
Hmm. Yeah.
Let
Okay.
me call and make sure that's still on. It's all these levels of organization and interconnecting, if you will, or
Hmm.
even interpenetrating of things, so the
Okay.
memories all come together
Okay.
and the anticipations all come together.
Okay. The whole becomes much greater than the sum of the parts. So
Exactly.
let's talk about turbulence then. First, I want you to, because some people don't know what that is. So what is turbulence? And then what does this understanding of the brain have to do with turbulence?
Yeah. Um,
And
I
neurofeedback.
think most
Link that in there too.
and neurofeedback.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think most people have probably flown on a plane. If they haven't, they've been driven in a car, they've ridden on a bus or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
And none of those conveyances are perfectly smooth. There's always some bumpiness, if you
Hmm.
will,
Hmm.
as you're moving along. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Depends on the time of day, depends on the weather, depends on a variety of things.
Hmm.
Those bumpinesses, if you will, that's turbulence. So when you're on the plane, you want the plane to be straight and level, is the phrase. It's never actually 100% straight and level. It's
Yeah.
always moving a little bit. And depending on how sensitized you are to that, it will feel more or less turbulent.
Hmm. So
All right.
that's interesting. So there's turbulence, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the sensitivity to the turbulence, which becomes part of the turbulence. Is that?
Correct. For you as
Yes,
experience.
exactly. Yeah.
So the kinds of
Huh.
things that the Navy fighter pilots do, the top guns,
Hmm.
most all of us would be redecorating the inside of the cockpit because we'd be so responsive to that turbulence.
Yeah.
But for them, it's fun.
Hmm.
I mean, it's work, it's hard work, it's
Sure.
all of that. Don't get me wrong,
Right, but they
but they
thrive on
enjoy
it.
it.
Yeah.
They
Right.
thrive on that. That's right. So, is there an absolute level of turbulence? Yeah, we can measure how much the plane is shaking. We can measure how
Okay.
much things are shaking around in a cockpit or, whatever.
Hmm.
But it also matters how turbulent that is being experienced. The more
Okay.
resilience you have as an individual, in general, just speaking sort of general psychological functioning, the more turbulence around you can withstand for longer.
Okay.
The more you can change in response to that turbulence that you experience, to that evolving scenario around you and all the
Hmm.
little changes in it, the
Hmm.
more you can adaptively respond to it, that's flexibility.
Okay.
What we call disorder is not actually disorderly, it's highly ordered. So, what we're really trying to do is help reestablish the healthy levels of disorderliness. That's the resilience and flexibility. So that instead of
Mm.
when your spouse forgets the cream from the store, instead of going, how many times do I have to tell you? Which doesn't really help. It's not like magically the cream gets produced then, right? And if they say, "Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Let me go get some." No, no, it's too late now, right? Oh,
Right.
that's great. Okay, it's too late now. Well, then why'd you bring it up? If it
Mm.
really is too late,
Hmm.
what's, yeah, you know,
So what's the
wouldn't it be nice?
disorderly that would be more beneficial or
The
resilient
better
then?
would be
Yeah.
to say things like, "Oh, okay, so how are we going to enjoy our afternoon coffee right now? Oh, you know what? We have milk and we have some tea. Let's have tea with milk.
Mm.
Let's do something different,
Hmm.
right?" Another way, Sue has all these wonderful little sayings. Hey, she's British, so what can you say, right? And one of them actually involves tea. It's one of my favorite Sue stories. But the expression I was thinking of right then was "keep on keeping on."
Mm, mhm,
Right now, that doesn't mean no matter what you just keep doing the same damn thing. It means
mm, mhm,
just keep going.
mhm,
Stay the course.
mhm,
Don't just because it's a little bumpy doesn't mean you jump off the ship.
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
Keep on keeping on.
mhm.
So, you know, yeah, tea doesn't hurt.
Yes.
Let's put it that
Well,
way.
and then there's a
Right?
whole other level of turbulence, I'll say, right? When we're talking about, a
Mm-hmm.
marriage that's in trouble, right? Or when you've got
Mm-hmm.
extraordinary amount of stress with the kids, what does, resilience and
Yes.
flexibility mean then? And so now link this
Mm-hmm.
to neurofeedback.
Yeah, because what happens is one way to think about it is what we call disorders, right? Disordered behavior. That
Hmm.
is, we don't like it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And a disorder is really something we just don't like. That's really what it comes to. We dislike it. That's what makes it a
So that's
disorder. It's an
super
order.
profound. Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this, just take some deep breaths. Take some deep breaths, because I think that's,
Yeah.
you really have to step back and sort of see the forest for the trees to take that in. Um,
I I
Go
used
ahead.
I used to do a lot of work with
Hmm.
families with angry adolescents.
Okay,
That was
that's right.
something that I got called in a lot. And I remember one day I was meeting this family. It was really just an only son who was adolescent and the parents. And I was actually doing a live intervention with them to kind of demonstrate some stuff.
Mm.
And when I did those, I'd say, I don't want to know anything except names and genders. That's all I want to know. I don't want to hear history. I don't want to hear what's been going on.
Mm.
I don't care what's brought
Interesting.
them in. I don't
Mm.
want to hear any of that
Yeah.
because it's either right now in the room or it's just a belief. Right?
Mm.
And so I remember I sat
Mm.
down and it was, I kind of said, well, here we are. How can I help, do you think? What do you think I could do that could be
Mm.
helpful? And they said, well, he never listens to us. I went, oh. So I turned to him and I said, so I guess it was your idea to come here today, huh? And he went, are you kidding me? No. And I went, oh, well, how'd they get you to listen to him? They said I'd be grounded till I was 30 if I didn't come. Oh, okay. So I turned back to her and said, so you do know how to get him to listen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we shouldn't have to ought to do that. Well, that's an interesting belief.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not saying you should have to do that. I
Hmm.
don't think there's a should.
Right.
The question is, here's where you are. What do you want
Yeah.
to do now?
Right. Right.
Because,
Yeah.
the short version is what you're doing ain't working. You want to try something different,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's not, it's, to me, the way I sort of talk about that is it's not the problems we're facing or that we've created, even. It's
Yes.
how are we
Hmm.
going to respond to them now? Um,
Yes. It's
I
what do we
think
do
that's just
now? Here we
essential. Yeah.
are. Here we are. What do we do now?
Yeah.
Right? So, the turbulence of disorderliness,
Hmm.
disordered behavior, not effective behavior, can be because the behavior isn't effective. It could be because the intent behind the behavior isn't appropriate for the situation or the skills at hand. It's not one or the other, right?
Hmm.
Again, it's the organization, it's the entire context. So when you're looking at the brain and neurofeedback, the question is all the resources are there. Resilience and flexibility are there.
Here.
There's the health, yes,
Okay.
yes, it's intrinsic. Or you couldn't have learned to walk, you
Yeah.
couldn't have learned to talk, you couldn't have learned to read.
Right.
There's all
Well,
kinds of things that you just being there means resilience and flexibility and the ability to learn is there. However compromised it may have been,
right. That's what I
right?
was about to say, because we've started working with adolescents with severe. brain injury and no longer
Sure.
functional in many ways. And it's amazing to watch the ways that their brains can still function and improve.
Exactly.
Um, it's
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question then becomes not how dysfunctional are they, right? How damaged are they? But
Hmm.
how creative, how adaptive can you be
Hmm.
in facilitating their transformation?
Hmm.
There's two ways of looking at a certain phenomena. Somebody shows up at a building and they're in a wheelchair
Hmm.
and they can't get into the building.
Hmm.
Well, the old school way is saying, well, they're disabled, they can't get into the building. A more comprehensive way is saying the building wasn't designed to accommodate all the possible people who might show up to use it. How can we facilitate that?
Hmm.
Can
Hmm.
we put up some ramps? Can we, what can we do?
Hmm.
Because, okay, they're disabled, they can't get in there. Well, the building is disabled too, just as
Interesting.
much,
Okay.
right? It's the difference between, you look at the glass with the water, and the classic thing is it half full, is it half, you know, empty? And you get a systems engineer, and they'd say, well, the problem is you have too much glass here. But the, the realistic view is that the glass is always 100% full. 50% of it is water, 50% is air,
Mm.
but it's always 100% full.
Mm.
Right?
Okay.
So the turbulence in the brain, it's a very interesting thing, because you look at phenomena like seizure, particularly grand mal seizure,
Hmm.
and it looks like it's very
Hmm. Hmm.
disorderly, disorganized. Actually, it becomes hyper organized.
Interesting.
It becomes so organized that it can't do anything else.
Rigidifies.
Yes,
Is that okay?
it's a
Interesting.
very small range of behavior that it's capable of at that point.
Okay.
And if you
We've
don't do the right things and it progresses further, they will die. But
okay. Okay.
if you
So interesting.
it's a better, I think it's a more useful way if you come to things as a transformative agent, or an agent of change, an agent of transformation, to look at what can be done to facilitate the return of function, instead of just looking at deficit. So the
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
brain injured children and adolescents that you were
Hmm.
talking about, yeah, you can talk about the injury, and that's pretty
Hmm.
clear and okay.
Yeah.
But the
Hmm.
question is, what can you do with that? What can you do to help?
Hmm. So we
I
actually just
used to
had
do a
a
lot of
we had a question come
sorry,
in, but go
I
ahead. No, I want you to share.
yeah, I used to do a lot of work in hospitals at various points in my career. And I remember one time I was walking through a rehab unit,
Hmm.
and I saw this one gentleman in there, older guy, and he was just giving everybody fits. He was just screaming and yelling and, this is nonsense, and forget it. And blah, blah, blah. As I walked past, I saw he had a Ranger tat
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
World War II.
Wow.
And so as I walked by, I just slowed down for a moment and I said, Rangers lead the way. And I just kept going.
Hmm.
Came back about 10 minutes later.
Hmm.
This guy was up organizing everybody else, getting them motivated.
Okay.
And it's like, I could have looked at him and said, what a pain this guy is.
Hmm.
I saw something there that I knew was a resource at some point,
Hmm.
and maybe now it could still be a resource. It just had to be tapped.
Okay. And that's a lot of what neurofeedback does, particularly I think neurooptimal. But this
That's
question came
exactly
in.
right.
Yeah, this
Hmm.
question came in and says, which I love. Are you saying everyone's brain has the same level of capacity to be resilient, even in crisis situations?
I think there are a lot of presuppositions in that
Mm.
question.
Okay.
And I'd like to know what the question behind the question is.
Okay. So if you're listening, say a little bit more. Who asked that question? Yeah. So let's go back to the neurofeedback piece if we can then
Sure,
of,
sure,
of
sure, sure.
how
Yeah.
neuroptimals, right? So neuroptimal isn't trying to fix something.
No, no, we don't fix anything except pets and plumbing. You know, it's you know, the consensus on fixing some pets is sometimes it's better to keep them indoors for all kinds of reasons. You know, but
I hear you.
that's a whole different matter.
Yes.
Yeah, the fix idea is a real problem because it decontextualizes what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a lot of kids got labeled various things, ADD, ODD,
Mm-hmm.
um, because the school system wasn't figured out for them,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that conducive for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, it's a challenge. I get that. I'm not saying, oh, every school system should and every classroom should be perfect for every kid. No, that's an idealization, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and can we ever get there? Oh, it probably would be wonderful. At least I like to think it would be if
Mm-hmm.
we could. Will we ever get there? Probably not. Does that mean there are going to be some that don't get the kinds of supports that they could most optimally use? Well, yeah, it does, unfortunately. You know,
But
what does go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I think your point about context, and this is a Bowen kind of a concept, is that every
Hmm.
behavior. So we're talking about OCD, ADHD, uh, whatever, depression. These are all adaptations.
That's right.
They're adapting
They're
to the
all
context that they're dealing with. We might not like it, like you were saying earlier, but they're
that's right.
adaptations. They fit. Go ahead.
And the context adapts to that emergent behavior also.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not just a one-way street. It's as the Palazzoli family group used to talk about, it's circular causality. It goes around the entire group, the entire, you know, cohort, the entire environment. It's interactive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, will kids who are seen as ADD be angry or sullen? Well, yeah. What other choices are they going to have at some points,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if they really are gifted internally,
Mm-hmm.
but the way the system is set up for other good reasons many times, they can't show that. You know, they can't demonstrate what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of some twins that I had the ability, I had the real honor to evaluate many years ago, and these two twins. Uh, the first one who was born of the twin pair suffered an anoxic event during the birth,
Which is
which
so with that is for
lack
people.
of oxygen, lack of oxygen. The second one did not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sort of the way things happened. And the second one, which who arguably was the one who had the higher probability of suffering the anoxic event or the effects of it,
Mm-hmm.
came out actually with an exceptionally high IQ and creative ability. The firstborn was wheelchair bound completely, could not speak hardly. It was very few gestures of control, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, had been seen as utterly incapable of much of anything. Well, through traditional testing, of course, you're going to see the limits, and that's not bad. That's not
It's just not the
wrong.
whole story. Yeah.
It's not the whole story.
Yeah.
I did a lot of nonverbal kinds of and non-visual kinds of things with her and with her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, even now, a number of years later, it's very impactful. I was
Hmm.
able to tell the family and them present that, in my opinion, they were both equally capable and they were both equally intelligent. It's just she was stuck
Okay.
in a not useful body that couldn't respond well.
Hmm.
And we needed to do the best we could to get adaptive technologies in place.
Hmm.
And the little tear that came down from her,
Oh my goodness.
yes,
Wow.
it was the first time anyone outside of her family had,
Wow.
at least as far as I knew, really seen what was trapped in there. And
Okay.
imagine how awful that must have been.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if we can help them, if we can adapt, use
Hmm.
technology to help,
Hmm.
go for it. Absolutely. Let's make this happen,
Yeah.
you know. So what's neurofeedback doing? Does everybody have the same capability? Is everybody at the same level of intelligence or whatever as these twins were? I have no idea and I don't really care.
Hmm.
What matters to me is helping each person return to their own
Okay.
intrinsic optimal whatever that is.
Okay.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in the beginning to try to tell somebody, hey, well, you'll never be able to do this. Sometimes, okay, fair enough. But that should be the really rare exception. I mean, there
Yeah.
was a kid who I understand who just climbed El Capitan
Hmm.
using only his arms because
Hmm.
he was paralyzed below the waist or something like that. I apologize. I probably have the details a little bit wrong.
Okay.
But, you know, I think most people looking at him would say, oh, he'll never do that.
Hmm.
He did.
Wow. Yeah.
Took a long time,
Hmm.
but he did. And I'm not saying everybody should do that.
Uh-huh.
I'm just saying let's not put up artificial barriers because
Yeah.
we have a belief that the damage is so bad that they can't possibly do X,
Hmm.
Y, or Z.
Hmm. Yeah. I think, and I think that's what neurooptimal for me has been about is um, what am I capable of? What is Miriam capable of? What is my daughter Ella capable of? What is my daughter Hannah capable of? And what's the
Exactly.
best way to set up the environment, just like learning to walk, right? I can't teach them to be empowered young women, but I can set up an environment, you know, and they are, by the way. I'm still working on it.
Uh, I'll bet they are. Yes, as they should be. Yes.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing so openly. And
Excuse me.
yeah, it's been a pleasure to be with you again.
It's been great, and I'm always happy to do these kind of things. I know I can ramble at times and go various places that were not anticipated. And I apologize if we didn't answer all that many questions, but we'll get to them at some point,
No,
you
the
know.
question that came in, I thought was, yeah, uh, I loved how you
Okay,
answered it. So, yeah. So,
great. Okay.
moms, if you have questions for me about, what does neurofeedback look like? Is it safe? Is it really hard and complicated to do? Things like that. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can just find me in the group and pretty darn responsive. So, uh, thank you, everybody, listening tonight with us. And we'll look forward to seeing y'all again. Bye bye.
Thank you.